Um, Maya, I'm going to start off by asking you a question.
Yeah.
Uh, you're familiar with the work of April Dunford, I'm sure.
Yes, I've gotten the chance to work with her too. She's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so she famously says all the time there's brand and there's positioning, and those things are not the same.
No,
Do you agree?
I do agree. I definitely agree. Yeah. The April Dunford a la product positioning world is definitely more like business positioning, and brand positioning is a lot more of that, like hitting home in the heart of your customers. So we'll talk a lot more about that today.
Wonderful. Yeah, Maya is teaching a class at cxl.com. I see Joe in the chat is saying that she loved your class or he
Thanks,
loved your
Joe.
class, Maya. So that's great. Okay, so Maya, please share your slides. I'm going to hop off the stage and I'm going to join you again after your presentation. And everybody, you can post your questions or comments as Maya is progressing through her prepared thing. All right. I'll see you later.
Bye, Pep. Okay, cool. I have never used Livestorm before, so can I get some thumbs up or in the chat that you guys can see my screen? You can hear me. We're all good. Okay, cool. I won't be watching questions like super religiously during the time, but ask them anyways. We'll come back to them, or if I see them, and I'll try to grab them while I talk. All right. So, Todd, how does positioning and brand positioning apply to service businesses? Well, I come from the SaaS world, so we will be talking a lot about that. So let's start. Just a little bit about me. I lead product marketing and brand marketing at ShopMonkey. ShopMonkey is a B2B Series C company. We're backed by Bessemer and Venture Partners. I'm really honored, honestly, to be leading the creative team there. Shout out to my awesome team member, Kyle, and product marketing and program management and content. Really good stuff there. I've been in vertical SaaS, in B2B SaaS specifically, for a little over 10 years. I really love joining industries that are just starting out on their digital transformation journeys. 10 years ago, that was construction technology for me. And now at ShopMonkey, what we're doing is helping every independent automotive care shop thrive. And so that is the automotive care market is ripe for that right now. I'm a product marketer by trade. I live here in LA. I'm coming to you live from my garage. And I am a mom of 3 kids under 3 years old, and that includes twins. Happy to talk about any of that anytime. It is a lot. I have learned a lot of patience, a lot of prioritization skills, and I drink a lot of coffee. So, today we'll go back to the basics. Just a lot of confusion between what is product positioning versus what is brand positioning. So we're just going to start with the very fundamentals. What are each product positioning, brand positioning, how to do them, and really what happens next, what happens after we do those initial exercises. And then we'll do some Q&A. So just keep in mind the lenses that I'm bringing to this from my background in B2B, in that Series C world where we have about 200 employees at the time. I'm at ShopMonkey right now. So let's hop into brand and product positioning. I'm going to pull up some notes as well. All right. So let's start with the fundamentals. Your brand and your product itself are super inextricably tied. Let's talk about definitions. If we talk about a product as a good or a service that's offered to paying customers, and we define a brand as a set of perceptions and associations that customers hold about a company, it's really clear that you can't separate them. So the question is, well, why would we position each? What is the goal of positioning each of these things? And the goal of positioning each of these things and the exercise of positioning itself from a product perspective is to position yourself as favorable in the commercial marketplace for product positioning. And for brand positioning, it's really to position yourself as favorable in the hearts and in the eyes of your customers. So from their perspective. So product positioning, that fundamental business commercial mindset, brand positioning, really the winning over the hearts of your customers. And so let's just dive right in to all of the questions that you have to ask yourselves, because positioning exercises in general are just a series of questions that you have to ask and a series of assumptions that you have to build through. So to favorably position your product, so talking about product positioning now, you really have to be able to answer these questions. So of course, what is your product? It all starts with what your product actually is and what category does it play in. What's the strategic narrative or the mission or the vision or the problem space that communicates why this product exists, or why this service is being offered, whether it's a product or a service. There is a strategic why. It usually comes from your founder or from your executive team. Who is your best fit customer? And who are those customers within your ICP? So ICP meaning your ideal company profile or ideal customer profile. And that is really getting a lot deeper into segmentation and personas development in that space. You also have to ask yourself, how do you want to be perceived within the competitive landscape? And the competitive landscape being, especially in tech, being both digital and all your other digital and SaaS and legacy competitors, but also analog competitors as well, and kind of status quo. And what is the buying criteria within the competitive landscape as well? And what are your product's unique capabilities and value? And it's not just about features here. If you're only talking about features here, you're not playing the game right. It's also about how you deliver the value of those features. It could be about the service that you could provide. Your unique capability could be about how you price and how you package the product. There's a number of different levers that can be pulled there to figure out what is the unique value that you provide. It doesn't have to be a feature, but it often is, and it's often a set. All right. So what are the questions that you have to ask yourselves if you're trying to favorably position your brand in the eyes of your customer? So these questions are more like, okay, well, who is your greatest customer hero and why? Who is that person specifically? What's their name? Where do they hang out? Where do they get their news? What are their interests and their family lives like? And what journey or mission are they on? What problem are they trying to solve? And then what are your differentiable kind of North Star attributes that personify your brand? These will be like 1 to 2 word attributes that are primary lenses through which you're going to make a ton of decisions, not just about your brand, but a ton of decisions about your business with these attributes. Like, for example, trust or transparently or transparency, or I think of Apple and I think of elegant, right? Or accessible. These attributes are really kind of the personification of your brand. And then think about how your brand shows up visually and shows up on paper and through tone of voice. How does it look and how does it sound, specifically in relation to your customer heroes? And those questions that we answered in the first one, who is your greatest customer hero? What do they think about? Where do they hang out? Where do they get their news? You know, how is your brand going to look and sound to them? They're the ones that this has to resonate with. And so you have to make sure that your brand's visual and tone of voice and identity really speaks to them. And then how does your brand show up across touch points and experiences? Touch points across the entire digital customer journey, but also experiences and activations in person, right? Like, how are you actually showing up and meeting your customers where they're at? So a lot of questions here that are involved in positioning. And a lot of similarities too, right? Like if you look at the questions here for the product positioning, you have a lot of you can see a lot of similarities between these questions and the brand questions. They're just variations on a theme. And that's because they're both about differentiation. And so product and brand positioning ultimately are trying to distinguish both your brand and your product. Your product is trying to be distinguished based upon some differentiated value. And the kind of currency that product positioning deals in is value equity. And brand, what you're trying to do with brand positioning is distinguish it based on its unique point of view and perception from your customers. And the currency that brand positioning deals in is really kind of reputational equity, perception-based equity. So even when you can monetize and you can distinguish your product through like real value for a customer, it doesn't necessarily even mean that a customer is going to buy it at that point. it's really kind of the old saying that everybody's probably heard of, the if you buy it, if you build it, they will come. And the kind of that if you build it, they will come phrase, I think, is really kind of living in a fantasy land, as many of us know, especially in tech. We all know that every human has some need that you can fill with some product, but actually convincing a person of that need, making them aware of that need, that it exists, that need is important and that it's urgent and that they should pay you to fill that need with a product, that whole process is selling. And that takes a ton of effort. It takes both product and brand positioning to do. And it appeals to both pragmatic, business-oriented decision-making and emotional decision-making. And so that's where I want to talk about the B2B buying hierarchy of needs, because again, I come from the B2B world here. And so this is my take on the levels of decision-making that brand and product positioning speak to. Some really smart people, not myself, at Harvard Business Review mapped the spectrum of what influences B2B buying behavior. And so at the very, very core, the very bottom of the hierarchy of needs is just ensuring that a product or a service that you're about to buy meets minimum table stake requirements. I hope no one here is thinking about pitching a minimum requirement of your product or your service as a differentiated capability. Because as we go further up the hierarchy, that's where we see opportunities for differentiation. Further up are functional and business needs. So if you're buying, you're thinking about, does this product do what I expect it to do? What value is in it for me and for my business? And these are often pragmatic decision-making levels where value-based product positioning is most likely to appeal. And then higher up on the hierarchy of needs, highest up are individual needs. Since even though in this instance of this hierarchy, these are B2B purchasing decisions, it's actually still a human buyer on the other end and human needs, even though they're buying on behalf of a business. And so you have to account for individual needs as well in that process. Individual needs like, hey, is this product going to allow me to leave the office early and hang out with my kids? Is this product going to make me look good? Is it going to advance my career? And at the very highest level of hierarchy of needs is inspiration, because every one of us is always seeking purpose. Every human is seeking purpose and hope and something to aspire to. And so these are very emotional decision-making levels where brand positioning is most likely to appeal. So that was a little bit about some definitions and some foundation. So let's go into, okay, brand and product positioning. How do we do it? And who does it and when? Let me go back in here and see. No questions yet. Awesome. And let me check. You guys can still, we're all good. You can still hear me. You can see the slides. Thumbs up, maybe. Love the emojis on Livestorm. All right, cool. All right, so how and who and when? So what are the inputs that you need for product positioning? So you'll need to bring a ton to the table, really. So the entry criteria for starting the process of product positioning is just deep knowledge. Spend your time researching up front, gathering data. You'll need to come to the table with a lot of product knowledge, utilization knowledge, who's using what aspects of your product, when and why, for what, and product costs. You'll have to come to the table with a lot of category knowledge as well. So these are assumptions that the market and your customers will bring to the table based off of the category of product that you say your product is in. And those assumptions will impact how they think about your product. If you say that your product is a CRM solution, there are already many expectations in the market for what a CRM solution will provide. Just like if you say your product is a cake, we have a lot of expectations for what a cake is and what we expect to find. And so you have to kind of work through what those category level assumptions are. You have to come to the table with your strategic narrative or your mission or your sense of why. This is often something that I mentioned you get from your executive team, from your founder group. Bring to the table a ton of customer knowledge. So who they are, how they use the product, how they buy, what is their buying criteria, what is their buying process. Of course, a lot of information about competitors and alternatives. We talked about that a little bit ago. And then what are your differentiated capabilities, not just features, right? So how you sell services, pricing, etc. A lot of different ways to differentiate. So all these inputs are what you have to bring to the table when you start the process of product positioning. And the actual process itself varies greatly, depending upon what size of company you are, who's involved, how you're going to do this. But it's really comes down, what it comes down to is a workshop where you are painting the competitive landscape and the unique buying criteria within it so that you and your product can fulfill that unique buying criteria. You're using the time in this workshop to get really tight on segmentation and make sure that you understand who is most important and why. You're grouping and kind of recognizing patterns in the differentiated value that you talk through, and you're grouping them into kind of value pillars. Usually there's no more than 3, and these are kind of the what you hang your hat on in terms of what value does your product or your service deliver. It's really important at this step to agree on your category point of view. So not just what category of solution are you, but what is the category point of view that you want to evangelize? And also starting to map the sales story that ladders up to the larger mission or why. And after you can do that in a workshop setting, which, takes sometimes, a few hours, takes sometimes a few days or a few weeks or a few months. It is completely dependent on where you are at in the process of product and business development. After that, you have to document this, codify it. Like you've done all this work, you've gotten it out of your heads, put it on paper, and then make sure that you align. Spend a lot of time making sure you align with your founders and your CEO and your C-suite and everybody down the line and all your stakeholders. And then you have to test it. The worst thing to do is to come out with product positioning or brand positioning that just doesn't resonate with your target audience. And Pep and Wynter know a lot about that. So shout out to Wynter for message testing. But that's a critical step in the process there. So what are the outputs of a workshop like this? So if you're thinking about product positioning, what are the outputs? Well, positioning frameworks. There's many out there. Pep mentioned April Dunford in the beginning. She has an awesome framework for it. So does the Product Marketing Alliance and a ton of other frameworks out there. Other outputs of product positioning are personas and the articulation of pain points, opportunities, and desires, value mapping, customer proof points to actually prove that you do deliver the value that you say that you do, competitive intelligence programming, messaging, and then segmentation all throughout your sales and marketing motions. So segmentation, not just in identifying who are your most important audiences and why, but really who's actually selling to them. So how is your sales team organized? How are your marketing channels and distribution channels distributed by segment? So who is involved in product positioning? So the person who leads this is the product value owner in your org. Depending upon your org, it's totally dependent, size and structure dependent. It's most often product marketing. Sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's product, sometimes it's your CEO. No matter what, you always have to be aligned with your C-suite. Do you do product positioning internally or externally? It's definitely an internal exercise, but you can bring in outside resources to help. This is more common on the brand side, but it's actually becoming more common on the product side too. You'll always need some kind of internal owner and evangelist, but there's plenty of positioning advisors out there, a la April Dunford. And there's also a ton of newer product marketing consultancies out there like Olivine and Fluvio. So they are kind of new to the market and really crushing the scene there. So brand positioning, a little bit about the inputs. So what do you have to bring to the table when you're thinking about positioning your brand? Again, to recap, why would you position your brand? To really become favorable in the hearts of your customers. So this kind of emotional side. So who's your primary audience? You really have to understand that. Where are they? What do they care about? What's the strategic narrative or mission or why? We talk a lot about that, you'll recognize. What are the differentiable values that distinguish your company from all others? And then based on what you know about your audience, what will your brand's visual style be, right? So this is, a little bit of a recap here. And then how do you show up, of course? What happens in this workshop is that you're really trying to define your hero as a human. So who is your customer hero? You're also trying to translate the product values and the differentiated values that you've defined in your product positioning workshop. You're taking those and you're combining them with your company values. For example, at ShopMonkey, our company values are hungry, humble, and smart. And so if I were to do a brand positioning workshop, I would take that and I would take the differentiated product values that we have, and I would translate that into several 1 to 2 word brand North Stars. And those North Stars would be used throughout every decision about how we show up at events. What kinds of marketing and sales motions do we have? What kinds of product motions do we have going on? So really those brand North Stars are not just meant to inform what goes on the website. They're meant to inform entire company strategy. So during this workshop, it's important to agree on that. Usually workshopping and whittling down takes many hours or many weeks. Then you'll agree on a visual identity and a tone of voice and languaging, making sure that the language that you use speaks to your customer base, especially in vertical SaaS industries where digital transformation is on the kind of the earlier side, like my career has been in. Like construction technology 10 years ago and now automotive repair industry. The customers in those industries can really smell bullshit a mile away. And so it's really important that you get your languaging right and that your tone of voice is on and that you're not too jargony and that you're speaking the language that they speak. And of course, same as with product positioning, document it. You've gotten all of this out of your head, out of your founder's head now, document it, align with them, and test it, of course. What are the outputs here? Brand positioning frameworks, again, many out there that you can choose from. Personas development that are more based on human behavior, more like marketing personas versus business personas. And then you've probably heard of like a brand book or brand guidelines. That's an actual artifact that talks about your brand attributes, your tone of voice. It really gives you, your organization, and any contractors that you work with the opportunity to just unlock a whole lot of velocity in production when everybody is aligned around the same guidelines for how to talk about and position your brand. So who is responsible for brand positioning? Your brand owner in your organization is. And again, size and structure dependent. It's most often a creative team or a brand team, almost always marketing, sometimes your CEO. Always, again, aligned with your C-suite. And this is an internal exercise, but it's actually more common in the brand world to bring in outside or agency help, especially to workshop a lot of this creative stuff. Again, you always need that internal owner or evangelist, usually that creative team or a brand team. I have a senior brand manager on my team who is our brand owner at ShopMonkey. And there's plenty of brand strategy advisors and creative agencies out there who can help. So let's talk about when this happens. So we'll talk a little bit about the development cadence here. So not only are elements of brand and product positioning interdependent themselves, like the value that you take from product positioning and you build on it in brand, the story about the why, but comprehensively answering all of those questions very methodically, like we just laid out throughout the positioning processes, is actually a really big influence on how the product is built and how your business is run. Answering questions like those that we've talked about really spur a ton of strategic alignment discussions and often kick off a lot of kind of strategic future planning. So let's zoom in there. If you start with defining the mission, so you have to start with, why does your company exist? Why does your product exist? What problem or mission are you trying to accomplish in the world, or a problem that you're trying to solve? And then we move into, of course, once you have that mission, you build a product or a solution around it, and you build a company around it. And product positioning is a critical part of building that product. Brand positioning is a critical part of building that company or that business. And the earlier positioning occurs in those processes, the better, because each brand positioning and product positioning will isolate critical growth levers like segmentation, category point of view. And to be able to isolate those growth levers and to talk about them and align them and get clarity on them throughout the org is really just the velocity that you need to grow. And of course, how the brand and the product are ultimately positioned throughout these exercises and answering of these questions will have long-term product and business impact. After all, how you position yourselves as favorable in the marketplace and in the eyes of your customers. So hearts and mind there, product and brand, they're really just different levers to pull at the end of the day. You can choose to dial them up or down however you like. And I think that a couple good examples here are liquid death water. If anyone is here has had liquid death water or has seen liquid death water, it was really funny that it showed up at a preschool event the other day. And so this is an example of a company who is really dialing up on the brand positioning and dialing down on the product positioning. In fact, there's hardly a product there at all. It's just water. That's literally what their tagline says. And so the product essentially is its brand. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have companies like Stripe, and this is a screenshot from Stripe's website in their early days. And in its early days, Stripe was leaning really heavily into the product innovation positioning. So the differentiated capabilities behind its API and it being really, really easy to use and developer friendly. And so in those early days, they really dialed up on the product positioning there and the certain aspects of product positioning. And dialed down on the brand positioning. But over time, obviously, we know what Stripe has grown into. And Stripe has really become kind of the standard for SaaS billing systems now. And today, you see Stripe looking very different. And you can see how their product positioning and brand positioning has really changed over time, leaning into more of their popularity, right? You can see in the subtext, they're leveraging their customer base as part of their value prop. They're leaning into their ecosystem, right? They're the financial infrastructure for the internet, and they have a much more stylized vibe going on. I like it. So to remember, just a note, a quote from another great positioning book. For each exercise to be successful, both brand positioning and product positioning, you have to ignore conventional logic that says, find your concept inside yourself or inside the product. Not true. What you must actually do is look inside the prospect's mind. I think this is just a really good quote and grounding moment for us to remember that what we do is not about ourselves. What we do is about the industries that we serve and the customers that we do it for. And so ultimately, we have to look to them to inform our product positioning and our brand positioning. And it's really all about those customer heroes and what we can do for them and for their industry. Especially in the B2B world. So what's next? So you have done your brand positioning and your product positioning workshops. Congratulations. It's a hell of a lot of work. So what happens next? You have to validate and operationalize. And so what I mean by that is validate is obviously testing your product positioning and testing your brand positioning. You're testing different things within those two positioning frameworks. And product positioning, you're testing more of the kind of business viability aspects. Like, do we have the right target audience here? Is our segmentation correct? Are we talking about our value in the right way? Versus on the brand positioning side, you're testing for a lot more of like, are we using the right language? Does this kind of tone of voice and does this visual identity and do these attributes resonate with our target audience? And of course, there's different ways to test each one. So testing on the product positioning side, it takes the form of, getting an MVP out there, learning from a minimum viable product in market, and doing a lot of testing through your sales motions and how are your sales teams selling. Brand positioning, a lot of testing through tools like Wynter, message testing, A/B testing on your website, using paid campaigns to do testing, things like that. So after all that is done, you've confirmed that you, in fact, are going to resonate with your intended audience, with the intended message that you get from the positioning. From product positioning's perspective, you'll then refine it into specific product messaging by vertical or by pain point or by persona. And then you move into getting proof for those value points to be able to actually prove that, yes, we do have customer proof points. And then you're going to move into enablement. So enabling your internal and external evangelists to really live and breathe that product positioning. So sales enablement specifically and revenue team enablement, but also external enablement in terms of community evangelists as well. And then in terms of brand positioning, what you're going to do once you have that is integrate it across every customer touch point. So across the entire journey from awareness through conversion all the way through advocacy, you're going to integrate it across every customer touch point and through every marketing channel and every sales channel. You're going to figure out how to integrate to those brand attributes. So enablement and integration here is really about a shared mission and vision and shared value that brand and product positioning bring to the table that everybody should live and breathe. It's all together your story. The CEO is really your chief evangelist, and it's up to who I assume, like many of you here on the call today, marketers, creatives, product marketers, it's up to you guys to enable your CEO and to enable every single employee down the line within your company to be evangelists for your brand and your product positioning, AKA your story, right? So within your product, how do you enable and integrate this? You integrate it into the experience inside your product. And then your positioning must also be rooted, of course, in the value that your product provides. For example, if accessibility is a differentiable brand and product value point, you're probably going to be building some product-led growth motions, because if accessibility is a North Star for you, that means you're going to want to break down barriers to entry to your product. And so you're probably going to be thinking about, how do I build product-led growth motions? So really, that's kind of an example of like how deeply brand and product positioning really has to be ingrained and integrated into your company and strategy and decision-making. When you think about enabling and integrating your customer journey and your customer touch points with your brand and product positioning, every touch point must reflect the story and the attributes. So from your top of funnel marketing efforts through your sales motions all the way to advocacy. Let's take Apple as the example again. I think one of Apple's North Stars in terms of brand attributes is elegance. Everything about Apple screams elegance, from the actual vibes of their advertising to the feeling in product when you're texting in your group message chain. It just feels elegant, right? To getting help at a Genius Bar, even to the elegance of at the highest business level of Apple's decision making when they make decisions about their self-fulfilling ecosystem of products to sell you for basically every need that you have. That feels pretty elegant too. And so every customer touch point has to reflect those brand values too. And then, of course, your perception in the marketplace as well. That's really about your credibility, your reputation, and your category. It really lies in the careful articulation of your value, but also, really importantly, your proof and how you prove that. So how do you measure efficacy when we're talking about brand positioning and product positioning? Effectiveness of product positioning can be measured by your revenue numbers. So your targets, your market share, how quickly you are getting the best fit customers through your sales funnel the fastest. So kind of sales velocity is what I call that. And then product stickiness. So once customers and prospects do convert, are they sticking around in the product? And how fast are they getting to value in the product? So all those are kind of measures of product positioning effectiveness. And then when I think about brand positioning effectiveness, what I think about looking out for is earned media and my organic pipeline numbers and the percentage of the pipeline that's brought in from those organic and earned media motions that I have going on. I'm thinking about community advocacy and like the fan base that you want to grow and your reputation. So almost there. Why do we do this at the end of the day? Really about clarity and about focus. If you can very clearly define your product positioning and very clearly define your brand positioning and execute and operationalize on them and take the whole company along the journey with you, you have such clarity and such focus, and that's really, really what you need for growth. You need everybody on the same page to really move fast and break things in the best way possible. So to recap here, it's all about clarity and focus. Product positioning is more of the kind of business specific commercial marketplace elements. Brand positioning is more kind of creative specific, winning the hearts of your customer over. Product positioning trades in that kind of value equity currency and is part of that kind of product development process. And brand positioning, it trades in that perception equity currency and is really part of the process of building your company and building your business. So let's see. That's last one is in situation. We've talked a lot about this in theory today. So awesome, great, sure. Like, way to go, theory. What does this look like in practice? It's really messy. I will speak from experience. It's really messy, and that's okay. Know that it's also iterative. And this is not just a one and done type of thing. You will always constantly iterate based upon the feedback that you're getting from your front lines and from the testing that you're doing. You should build cyclical feedback loops in so that you can always be iterating to the best product and brand positioning that you can. And it's just ongoing. It never ends, right? There's a big lift at the beginning to get it codified and documented and aligned, and then it never ends from there on. All right, so that's it for the content. Where can you find me next? You can find me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect. On LinkedIn, I talk about some mom stuff. I also talk about B2B marketing. Pep mentioned my CXL mini degree course. I teach a course called Messaging That Matters. And then I'm going to be speaking at the Product Marketing Alliance Summits coming up here in Las Vegas and San Francisco, and I would love to meet you there. So I will hop back over to Livestorm, and I will stop sharing. And yes, we will. I can go through some questions. Oh, awesome stuff here. Awesome questions.
Yeah. So before we get to everybody else's questions, we'll start with mine.
Yeah.
I only have 27 easy questions here.
No
So
problem.
that slide you had about measurement, how to measure positioning. Yeah. So what stood out for me was that all the metrics you showed there were lagging metrics. So you ship your positioning, and then 6 months later you can see what happened. What about leading measures that I test my positioning in the next hour? Things like, do they get it? Clarity. Things like relevance. Does it speak to my situation? Like, is it like speaking to me, or things like other things like that? So, yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that I would love to try Wynter. That's what I'm thinking. I have not tried it before, but yeah, the yes, lagging indicators for these things. Many times in the process of development of product positioning and brand positioning, you're kind of coming to it, and the process is answering the questions and getting all the information out of people's heads and then validating it. And so throughout the process of validating it, you get a lot of information about like, okay, does this resonate or not? And then from that kind of question of like, yes, does this resonate or not? Then you can figure out like, okay, well then do we implement it? I don't really have like an awesome answer for you on like leading indicators. Do you have an answer, Pep? Because I would love to hear your answer.
Yeah, I mean, my point of view on this is that before you ship it and stick with it, I mean, what you want to do is have fast feedback loops. Because like it might be shit, but you don't want to find out 6 months later. You want to find out tomorrow.
Yeah. What about like, I know like, what about what I've done is like scrappy validation, like in real time with the sales team. So like I've done like mock sales decks, and then I've had like, chosen a couple of sales leaders to take out the mock sales deck and then get real-time feedback from that. So that is like a way, but
yeah, that's totally valid way to go about it. It's not as fast as it could be, in my opinion. So to test it in 10 to 15 demos, it's going to take a while. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe
Oh,
you have so many demos per day that it's no problem. And I mean, it could be, yeah. If you have 100 demos a day, sure, that's different. Yeah. So I like to think of it as like the clarity. Do I get the positioning? Do I get what you're trying to be? And relevance. Do I get that it's for me? If I am your ICP, like, do I also feel that I'm your ICP? You can test it right away. Or things like differentiation, because positioning should capture that. Like, is it clear how this is better or different than category leader? Things like that. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously Wynter is one way to test it. You could of course use Typeform survey and send it out to some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done that before
Okay,
too.
let's move to the next question. So, you talked about in the under the brand positioning about being personified. So, I mean, I think it's fairly easy to find Liquid Death and other B2C examples, but like B2B SaaS brands, what's an example of who's doing this well?
I think Drift is doing this really well. Drift is. Are you guys hearing a little bit of an echo, or is that just me on my end? No. Okay,
Sure.
I'll start going. I think that Drift is doing this really well. Drift is basically, they are known for doing a little bit of category design. They kind of designed the category of conversational marketing. And as such, they really kind of, what I feel their vibe is from a brand North Star and attributes is like, conversational, like fun, conversational, accessible, being able to talk to anybody at any point in time through any of the chat bots, right? Like you can access any information at any time. They have their little chat bot right on their website, right place, right time, right conversation. So, I think that Drift is doing it pretty well. I would have to go through and say like, okay, well, what do I think by like assessing their stuff? What do I think that their attributes are? But I think they're a good example.
Okay. Yeah. And to keep going with the brand side, I think it's easy to find bold branding, like Liquid Death branding. This stands out as bold in their own category. In B2B SaaS, mostly it's very safe, undistinctive, exactly what you would expect. I mean, I can only think of Basecamp that's going against the grain, but like,
well, what about like ClickUp? ClickUp is a good example too. I think ClickUp
how is that not what you expect? I think it's just as could put Asana logo on it and it would just fly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like when I think about the Asana brand though versus the ClickUp brand, I do think that ClickUp is like a lot more playful, a lot more fun. When I think about how they show up in activations and on their marketing channels.
What about Monday then? Monday is also
Monday. I just don't. Monday it doesn't stand out to me.
Okay. In case you're a single product SaaS company, which is most SaaS companies, so the line between brand and product positioning to me gets blurry. Visuals aside, so for instance, languaging, communicating what I am as a tool, where is it the same then? The brand and the product positioning?
As a tool. I think that like where you draw the line is if you're communicating what you are as a tool in terms of your value and your function. So this is where I would go back to that like B2B hierarchy of needs. So if you're talking about your business value, your functional value, it's product marketing and product positioning. If you're talking about your like the value that is meant to appeal to an individual person, so like an individual human need, like, oh hey, does this help me like go home earlier, does this help me accomplish this awesome aspirational goal that I have, am I inspired by this brand? That's really on the brand side.
Name a B2B brand that talks about the soft values as a leading thing, because I can't think of any.
I know it's really hard on the B2B SaaS side. I do think that that's a great question. I mean,
so that kind of tells me two things. Either the rules for B2B are different, or it's greenfield opportunity for those of us who are courageous enough to do something like that,
I
right?
think that it's the latter. It's like those who are courageous enough to do something, and those are my examples. Like when I think about Drift and I think about ClickUp,
Mhm.
those are the people who are out there on their channels who are talking about different things, who are acting in different ways, and they're not just talking about the safe, functional values. They're not talking about saving time and saving money. Nobody in B2B SaaS wants to hear about saving time and saving money anymore. Like nobody wants to hear that anymore. They're talking about like, being playful, being I mean, gosh, I would love to I'd love to answer that question deeper.
Yeah, Gong. Marisa here says Gong is a good example. Well,
Gong.
Gong is
I
also
love
an example
example.
of.
I love the Gong example. Yes, yes. We use
So,
Gong. Yep.
are you familiar with the
Yeah.
change they made in the recent months?
No, tell me about it.
So, I mean, it was all they went all in with their creating a new category, and they
Oh
had
yeah. Revenue and
fluffy, aspirational languaging happening on their homepage. I mean, not as bad as the co-working, not as we work, but it was some bullshit like that. And visionary messaging is right. And then they were like, actually, in this today's economic environment, people don't want bullshit, lofty statements of saving the goodness of humankind, whatever it was. And now it's like make more money by 72%, more revenue. So uh,
Gong is a
Linda
great
says
example.
Walmart.
Huh?
Walnut. The only thing I remember is their before and after ads contrast. Do you know the Walnut brand? It's like
I
product
do not.
demos.
Mm-mm.
Otherwise, besides that, their ads, I think it's more of the same, in my personal opinion. But brand is who we say they are, not who they say they are,
Right,
right?
exactly. That's the big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And Tamara? Oh, well, Tamara says product positioning is the text that goes on the website. Okay, so in my opinion, positioning is your internal strategy documents, how you think about it. Once it makes it onto your website, it's messaging. What do you think?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's totally correct. Like the cadence is like you develop your positioning as a business and as a product, and then you move into messaging. And then when you choose to move into messaging, you have to choose, well, what filters are you going to apply? Are you going to message based off of personas or problems or jobs to be done? Right. So,
Yeah. Well, Elena is right. It's copy, right? I mean, because
mhm.
messaging is
Messaging is not
what are
copy,
the
right? Like, yeah,
key
I would
things
even
we
say,
want them to. Yeah, no.
yeah.
Dr. DG, yes, there's going to be a deck. Okay, before we run out of time, let's take some audience questions too. Otherwise, I have 20 more. Heather is asking, okay, strategic narrative, I guess,
Mhm.
as defined by Mr. Andy Raskin, comes
Yeah.
from the CEO, founders, executives.
Mhm.
So, why is it that a product and brand positioning comes from multiple levels down, not C-suite?
Yeah, it's because we as in like us at the director and at the operational level are the ones who need to action, who need this to action on it. Therefore, we're the ones who often like kick off the process. But you can't do it without your C-suite, and you can't do it without your founder, your
They will
CEO. So,
sign it off on it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Paul is asking, so based on the pyramid you showed earlier, does it
Mhm.
mean you need to nail your product positioning before brand positioning, or can they be worked on simultaneously?
I think they can be worked on simultaneously, but you do need the differentiated value from your product positioning, right? Like if you think about a sandwich, the meat of the sandwich is essentially your product. Without your product, you don't have a company, you don't have anything to sell unless you're liquid death. So you need to nail what that differentiated value is, and then translate that into your brand attributes. So that I would say they can be worked on simultaneously, except for that one piece.
Yeah, the differentiated value, that's a hard one, right? Because
It's super hard.
if you're in a crowded category, you're a CRM, you're a marketing automation, live chat,
Like tens of
GTP
thousands.
powered.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so many companies still position themselves as if they're the only one doing what they're doing. They say, here's our
Yeah.
table stakes value.
Yeah.
Get rid of spreadsheets.
Oh my God, I know. And yeah, nobody, especially in commoditized markets, nobody wants to hear about that table stakes value anymore. And if you're still using that kind of positioning, then I think to me, that means that you just haven't tested it enough and that you're leaving money on the table.
Totally. I think if you're the category leader, you're Salesforce, fine. You can say whatever the hell
Right.
you want.
Right.
Everybody else needs to be, well, why would you use me instead of Salesforce or HubSpot or
Right.
whatever?
Yeah, because if you're not the category leader, you're trying to carve out a subsection of the category for yourself,
Mhm.
or you're trying to define a new category. And either way, it just requires like really, really tight positioning.
Gabriel is asking, can you mention a couple of brand positioning frameworks you referred to
Mm-hmm.
or you recommend?
Yeah, I recommend April Dunford and her work. Her book is called Obviously Awesome. She talks about her whole framework in her book. You can buy it. And then the Product Marketing Alliance is a really good resource as well. They have an entire framework section you can check out there.
Todd is saying here, how does positioning apply to service businesses?
Well, your service
Yeah,
is your product, right? So, it's whether it's a subscription SaaS kind of a service or like a customer service, a consulting service that you offer. Like, I think a really good example would be those newer product marketing consultancy firms that I mentioned, like Olivine and Fluvio. They're service businesses, but they treat their services as their product. And you see that in the way they position themselves.
I think agencies, if like service
Mm-hmm.
professional services firms,
Mm-hmm.
are especially commoditized. We do
Oh,
SEO and PPC, and we build
yeah.
websites, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so hard. I think, and that means that if you're not a famous brand and you're like, we also do SEO, then I mean, either be the cheapest, which is impossible, or just you gotta focus.
I mean, yeah, now you're competing with kind of the pendulum swinging back to in-house teams now too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think my personal point of view of being an agency owner myself, Spiro,
Mhm. Yeah.
is that people want to hire an agency because of their expertise. Okay, if you're big and famous like McKinsey, that's your brand, right? I want McKinsey experts to come fix my business. Most of us are not McKinsey, right? You have like 10 guys, 5 guys, or most likely 2 men and their dog, In that case, the brand is the person. Don't
Mhm.
try to be Synergistic Searchlight Inc. and we do SEO. No,
No, no.
be Todd Jones because
Yeah.
nobody else can be Todd. Todd
And
can
I
be the
think
best Todd.
Yeah, and in the example of like your brand attributes, like if we're to take the example of like the Todd Jones service business, like
Mhm.
how Todd shows up to every interaction that he has with every client and every prospective client is going to be the unique value there. Like, how do you actually show up?
Exactly. Yeah. So when I started my agency, my whole brand play was become the most famous person in the field in conversion optimization in this case, and so they want to hire me. And
Yeah, you're
and of
well on
course,
your way. You've made it, Pep. You've made it.
and then that trend now Spiro is like I don't know 50 people or something, right? I mean, and I'm not anymore involved in a day-to-day basis, but basically, it was about them wanting to work with me in particular. They didn't even
Mm.
give a shit what my company's name was,
Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
Refine Labs is doing this really well. Refine Labs is an agency, but they are
yeah.
all over LinkedIn, and like they must have some kind of mandate that every employee is like a really savvy content creator because they are posting the best stuff, and everybody wants to work with them because they are just all over it all the time.
Well, it's the same exact playbook. Well, Chris Walker, famous
Yeah,
guy. Oh, Chris is going to work on my business. He
yeah,
knows what he's talking about. And he's
yeah.
just positioning himself as the most knowledgeable person
Uh-huh.
when it comes to demand gen, right? Same
Uh-huh.
idea. Okay, Megan is saying, do you have any advice for when different teams view the brand differently? For example, our product team and marketing team don't align and we don't have a clear brand owner.
Yeah, that sucks. But that's why I would go through the workshop exercise. And in that case, when you have like really big misalignments between teams, I would bring in somebody outside, like a third party, to help facilitate the discussion and walk you through a very structured approach of like, okay, well, product team, what do you think the brand value, differentiated values and attributes are? Marketing team, what do you think? And then break down and recognize the patterns and draw corollaries between all of them until you align.
And I would add here that if you cannot find consensus, or it doesn't need to be consensus, but commit and disagree and
Commitment.
commit type of
Yeah.
thing. If you can't get on the same page, okay, this is what we're doing, then just escalate it to whoever is the boss over the two functions, and let the boss make a dictatorship,
Yeah. I mean,
dictatorial decision.
yeah, if you're talking about brand positioning and product positioning, I would hope that your CEO and or your founder wants to be really involved, because it's like very reflective and like has to be from the top down. And so, yeah, I would suggest, if you don't have a highly involved founder or CEO, get them involved.
Mm-hmm. Tatiana is asking, how do you measure the brand positioning versus product? How often should a company change its positioning?
Well, you change your positioning in response to many different things: markets changing, your product value changing, your category changing, competitors. And so really, like, that's what you're constantly having to monitor and assess the ecosystem for. So are you adding new features and net new product value? Do you have a new competitor that's changing the space, right? So in response to a lot.
Yeah, we talked about the Gong example, because the economic situation, macroeconomic situation changed, and they
Yeah.
went from aspirational, visionary messaging to more bottom of the funnel type of thing.
Yeah. And I think
Um,
many other companies, in addition to Gong, did that, especially with the pandemic and with COVID now, and like needing to move toward more efficiency, and especially with more all of the tech layoffs too. Like a lot of the messaging has moved toward cost savings and efficiency, just because of the macroeconomic environment.
yeah, and I'm about to embark on this with Wynter, because we've been positioning ourselves around our flagship product, the message testing product, but
Mhm.
we're already more things. There are different products inside, and we're launching a bunch more. So really, it's about, as I call it, buyer intelligence, like feedback from your ICP, and
Hmm.
it's not doesn't have to be about message testing. Can be interviews for product, can be sales demos. I want to pitch,
Hmm.
my ICP.
Buy intelligence. Are you creating a new category, Pep?
Kind of, like, in the sense that it's its own category of a thing.
Uh-huh.
There's no box we can fit into,
Yeah.
but not in the sense that I'm creating an ecosystem of customer success like the Insight did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, Another question: do product marketers need to know content marketing?
Hmm. That's a great question. I'm biased toward that because I lead both product marketing and brand marketing, and content marketing is a big part of that. Um,
Mhm.
I would say that content marketing is about building trust and credibility with your consumers and your prospects, right? Like the content that you put out gets them to become aware of the need, recognize the need, and then move them through the pipeline accordingly. And so, if you are familiar with content marketing as a product marketer, you are familiar with how your work is operationalized on the distribution side, which makes you an even better product marketer.
Mhm. Paul is asking a tricky question here. Demand testing. So we have completed message testing, and now we can put some money behind it, like PPC, to see if
Mhm.
there's demand for the product. What
Mhm.
metrics should we measure? What would be a good baseline rate? To me, this sounds like an entrepreneurship question, right? I have an idea for a product, and I want to see if they want to buy it. So
Yeah,
it
like what I'll do is, have you read? I would encourage you. What is the book?
Lean
Uh,
startup or customer development.
It's it's by Marty Kagan. How to create tech products customers love. Um, I would read that because they have it's very product focused, but they have a lot of amazing tests for like MVPs, like what to do with your minimum viable product and like what kinds of tests you can run to determine market viability and to see and to determine demand. Like even putting up a fake landing page before you even have a product, right? Just to just source and determine demand, things like that.
Yeah, and hopefully you've done a lot of customer development interviews. Like you've actually
Hopefully,
found
right?
people,
Yeah.
companies that have the problem you're about to solve and talk to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And even that can lead you astray. I remember when we were building Wynter, we did maybe 30 interviews for problem validation and validating that would they pay for our solution.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we actually launched the product to the market, we learned that a lot of our hypotheses were just bullshit. Because what people say, especially, is like, would you pay for this? Would you buy this? Will you buy this?
Yeah.
Until they actually
Really?
do, it means nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, because we're already over time here. So a lot of times there is no set format or framework for brand owner and product marketing owner to work in tandem. Both work towards driving value, so a lot of overlapping responsibilities. How can one develop clear goals for both while ensuring that the outcome is not affected? What do you
That's
think?
interesting. So, as somebody who leads both brand teams and product marketing teams, the way that I just segment the roles is that product marketing is about the strategy. So, product marketing is the foundation of defining what it is you sell, to whom, and why it's important. And so that's about audience insights, right? So the strategy of the who and the what and the why. And then brand marketing and creative marketing is about bringing that to life. It's about the production of that. And so that's where you have the all of the brand positioning exercises that live with your creative team. They take what the product marketer develops and strategizes, and they take it and they translate it into the customer point of view through production. And then, of course, you have your life cycle and your demand teams who go through and distribute it all to all your channels.
Would you recommend brand and product marketing being combined?
I don't know yet. I've been operating this way at ShopMonkey now for about 6 months, I would say, in earnest. And I will have more information for you in a little while. But so far, so good.
All right. We'll check in with you later.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Maya, so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Everybody follow her on LinkedIn, and we'll see you in the future.
Yes, this was fun. Bye.
Cheers.
Peace,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.